gleaming glass facade of the Grand Hyatt Taipei dominates the skyline of the Xinyi District like a beacon of modern prosperity. It stands as a monument to economic success and luxury in the heart of Taiwan. Travelers from the United States and across the globe flock here for its 5-star amenities and impeccable service. However, most guests are blissfully unaware of the dark history that festers beneath the foundation. This is not merely a hotel, but a golden tomb constructed directly on top of a land once cursed by death and suffering. The spirits of the past do not care for renovations or high thread count sheets because they are bound to the earth itself. History whispers that the land upon which this massive structure sits was once a place of immense sorrow during the Japanese colonial rule of Taiwan, before the shopping malls and skyscrapers rose up from the concrete. The soil was soaking up the blood of the condemned. Locals tell stories of a political prison and execution grounds that occupied this exact coordinate. It was a place where prisoners of war and political dissidents were sent to disappear forever. The air in this district was once thick with the smell of gunpowder and the heavy iron scent of demise, leaving a psychic scar that no amount of marble flooring can cover. When the decision was made to build a luxury hotel on this site, many locals whispered in hushed tones about the bad feng shui. In Chinese culture and Taiwanese tradition, disturbing a graveyard or a place of execution is an invitation for calamity. The developers pressed forward with the construction driven by the economic boom of Taipei. Yet the workers on the site began to report strange occurrences almost immediately. Tools would vanish into thin air, only to reappear in impossible places. Cold winds would sweep through enclosed concrete bunkers where no air currents should exist. The construction crew knew they were intruding on a gathering place for the restless dead. The grand opening of the hotel in the year 1990 marked a new era for the district. But the old residents had not evicted themselves. Management soon realized that the spiritual oppression of the site was palpable. It was not long before stories began to circulate among the staff and the guests. To combat the heavy energy, the hotel management consulted with feng shui masters. These experts confirmed the worst fears of the owners. The hotel was sitting directly on a spiritual intersection of pain. To counteract this, they installed massive calligraphy scrolls in the lobby, which looked like giant talismans designed to intimidate and suppress the spirits. These 2 enormous scrolls were placed in the lobby, specifically to ward off the negative energy rising from the soil. They were distinctive and unsettling to those who understood their purpose. Unlike typical decorative art in a luxury hotel, these scrolls bore characters intended to command the spirit world. For years, they greeted every guest who walked through the sliding glass doors, while tourists saw them as exotic cultural decorations. The locals knew them as spiritual shields. They were a desperate attempt to hold back a tide of darkness that threatened to consume the building from the bottom up. Imagine arriving at the hotel after a long international flight from Los Angeles or New York City. You are exhausted and suffering from jet lag as you step into the cavernous lobby. The air conditioning is cold, but there is a chill that seems to penetrate deeper than your skin. You check in at the front desk, where the staff smiles with practiced politeness. You do not notice the way their eyes dart nervously toward the elevators when the doors slide open on their own. You take your key card and ascend to one of the upper floors, unaware that you are entering a zone where the veil between the living and the dead is paper thin. A businessman named Arthur discovered this reality during a business trip in the late 90s. Arthur was a skeptic who laughed at ghost stories and dismissed superstition as nonsense. He was in Taipei for a technology conference and required a room that offered silence and comfort. The front desk assigned him a suite on a high floor at the end of a long corridor. As he walked down the hallway to his room, he noticed that the sound of his footsteps was swallowed by the thick carpet. The silence was absolute and heavy. It felt as though the air pressure dropped with every step he took away from the elevator. Arthur entered his room and tossed his briefcase onto the pristine bed. The room was immaculately clean and smelled of lemon polish and starch. He loosened his tie and moved to the window to admire the view of the city lights and the distant mountains. The view was breathtaking, but as he pressed his hand against the glass, he felt a vibration. It was not the hum of traffic or the wind. It felt like a rhythmic tapping coming from the outside of the glass. He pulled his hand away instinctively. He reasoned that it was just the settling of the building or the air conditioning system rattling in the walls. He decided to take a shower to wash off the grime of his travel. The bathroom was clad in expensive stone and featured a large mirror. As the hot water ran and steam filled the room, Arthur felt the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. It was the biological alarm system of a prey animal sensing a predator. He turned off the water abruptly and stood still in the silence. He heard a wet, slapping sound coming from the bedroom. It sounded like bare, wet feet walking across the carpet. He grabbed a towel and wrapped it around his waist before throwing open the bathroom door. The bedroom was empty. The lights were exactly as he had left them. Arthur laughed nervously and blamed his fatigue. He dressed for bed and tried to read a book, but his concentration was shattered. The room felt crowded. It is a specific sensation known to anyone who has experienced a haunting. The air feels dense, and the empty spaces in the room feel occupied. He turned off the bedside lamp and plunged the room into darkness. The only light came from the city glow, seeping through the edges of the heavy curtains. He closed his eyes and tried to force himself to sleep. Sleep came in fitful bursts, interrupted by strange dreams of mud and wire. Arthur woke with a start around 3 in the morning. The room was freezing cold. He reached for the thermostat to adjust the temperature, but his hand froze in midair. In the corner of the room near the armchair, there was a shadow that was darker than the rest of the room. It was not a shapeless blob. It had the distinct silhouette of a man standing at attention. Arthur blinked, hoping to clear his vision, but the figure remained. The figure seemed to be wearing a cap and a uniform from a bygone era. Paralysis took hold of Arthur. This is a common phenomenon in these encounters, known medically as sleep paralysis, but interpreted by spiritualists as suppression by a spirit. He could not move his arms or legs. He could only move his eyes. The figure in the corner began to move. It did not walk, but rather glided toward the bed. As it moved closer, Arthur could smell a pungent odor. It was not the smell of the hotel soap. It was the smell of damp earth and sulfur and old tobacco, the scent of a trench or a prison cell long abandoned. The entity stopped right beside the bed. Arthur strained his eyes to see a face, but there was only a blurring distortion where the features should have been. It was as if the face had been erased or covered by a black hood. Then Arthur felt a weight press down on his chest. It was crushing and immense. He tried to scream, but no sound escaped his throat. The pressure increased until he felt his ribs groaning under the strain. A voice spoke in his ear, not in English or Mandarin, but in a harsh guttural whisper that sounded like commands being barked in Japanese. The terror was absolute. Arthur felt that he was going to die in that luxury hotel room, thousands of miles from home. He focused all his mental energy on moving his little finger. He had read once that breaking the paralysis required a small movement. He fought against the invisible weight with every ounce of his will. The voice in his ear grew louder and more angry. The smell of decay became overpowering. Finally, with a surge of adrenaline, Arthur managed to jerk his hand. The spell broke instantly. The weight vanished. The figure was gone. Arthur scrambled out of bed and turned on every light in the suite. He was shaking uncontrollably and sweating despite the freezing temperature of the room. He did not pack his bags. He grabbed his wallet and his passport and ran out of the room. He did not wait for the elevator. He ran down the emergency stairs, flight after flight, until his lungs burned. He burst into the lobby, looking like a madman. The night staff looked up with mild surprise, but not shock. They had seen guests flee in the middle of the night before. He demanded to check out immediately. The concierge did not argue or ask why. The knowing look in the eyes of the staff member told Arthur everything he needed to know. They knew about the room. They knew about the man in the uniform. Arthur left the hotel that night and checked into a different hotel across the city. He never returned to the Grand Hyatt Taipei. He later learned that his experience was not unique. Many guests had reported seeing headless figures or feeling the sensation of being strangled in their sleep. The legend of the hotel includes stories of a famous martial arts movie star who had a similar experience. Rumors circulated that he checked out in the middle of the night after encountering spirits in his suite. While the hotel management officially denies these stories and insists the land was a munitions warehouse, the rumors persist. The presence of the talismans in the lobby for so many years served as physical evidence to the believers. Why would a modern hotel need giant ghost warding scrolls if there was nothing to ward off? Skeptics argue that the story is merely an urban legend, fueled by the unique architecture and the power of suggestion. They claim the layout of the hotel, which is shaped somewhat like a syringe, causes a subconscious reaction. However, the history of the Xinyi District is undeniable. The transition from execution ground to luxury accommodation happened rapidly. The earth remembers what the history books might try to gloss over. Construction workers unearthed bones and artifacts during the digging of the foundation, which were quietly removed. There are specific rooms that are rumored to be more active than others. Guests on forums and travel sites have swapped stories about room numbers to avoid. Some report finding the picture frames on the walls tilted every time they return to the room. Others claim to hear flushing toilets when no one is in the bathroom. The phenomenon of the phantom smell is the most consistent detail. The scent of old cigarettes and decay seems to follow the hauntings appearing and disappearing without a source. The elevators are another focal point of the supernatural activity. Guests have reported pressing the button for their floor, only to be taken to the basement or the service levels. When the doors open at these incorrect floors, they are greeted by dark, empty corridors that seem to stretch on forever. Some have reported seeing a woman in a traditional dress standing at the end of these service hallways, beckoning them to exit the elevator. Wise travelers hit the close door button and pray the machine takes them back to the light. In recent years, the hotel underwent a massive renovation. The famous talismans were removed from the lobby. The management stated that the hotel was being modernized, and the scrolls did not fit the new aesthetic. Spirit mediums and locals worried that removing the talismans would unleash the suppressed energy. They feared that without the calligraphy scrolls acting as a barrier, the spirits would have free reign over the entire building. The interior was updated with warm woods and contemporary art to dispel the gloomy atmosphere. Despite the renovations and the removal of the scrolls, the stories have not stopped. New reviews continue to appear online, describing uneasy feelings and strange noises. The ghost story has become a part of the brand identity of the hotel, whether they want it or not. It draws a certain type of tourist who wants to test their courage. These dark tourists request the haunted floors, specifically hoping for an encounter. Most of them leave disappointed, but a few leave terrified. The question remains regarding the ethics of building on such land. Is it possible to cleanse a site that has seen so much death? Feng Shui masters would argue that the land needs to rest for generations before it is habitable. By building a heavy structure on top of it, the developers trapped the energy. The hotel acts as a lid on a pressure cooker of spiritual angst. The luxury and the life within the hotel provide a stark contrast to the misery that exists in the soil. One particularly chilling account comes from a flight attendant who stayed at the hotel during a layover. She woke up to find the television on, with the volume at maximum static. The remote was on the other side of the room. When she got out of bed to turn it off, she saw wet footprints leading from the bathroom to the television stand. She was alone in the room. The footprints were small, as if made by a child or a woman with bound feet. She spent the rest of the night sitting in the lobby. The corridors of the hotel are designed to be grand and spacious, but at night they take on a different character. The lighting is dim, and the shadows stretch long across the carpet. It is easy to imagine things moving in your peripheral vision. The design of the hotel includes a massive central atrium. Looking down from the upper corridors into the lobby can be dizzying. Some say that spirits are drawn to this open space, using the verticality to move between floors without using the stairs or elevators. There is a rumor that the hotel keeps one room permanently vacant. This room is said to be the epicenter of the haunting. Housekeeping staff are allegedly required to enter in pairs and never stay longer than necessary. The door is always locked, and the number has been removed from the plaque. Whether this is true or just an embellishment of the legend, it adds to the mystique. Every hotel has its secrets, and a permanently locked door is a powerful symbol of hidden danger. The juxtaposition of the Grand Hyatt against the Taipei 101 tower nearby creates a narrative of old versus new. Taipei 101 is a symbol of the future reaching for the sky, while the Grand Hyatt is anchored by the weight of the past. The soil beneath the city is layered with history. The Japanese occupation left deep scars on the island of Taiwan. These scars are not just political or economic, but spiritual. The ghosts of the execution grounds are not just monsters, they are victims of a brutal time. Some paranormal investigators believe that the activity is residual. This means that the spirits are not conscious entities attacking guests, but rather recordings of past events playing on a loop. The tapping on the window and the marching footsteps are echoes of the prisoners who once waited for their end on this land. The stone and concrete record the trauma and replay it when the conditions are right. This theory explains why the spirits do not seem to communicate, but simply exist in their repetitive torment. However, the physical attacks, like the sleep paralysis and the pressure on the chest, suggest something more malevolent. A residual haunting does not interact with the living. A conscious entity does. If the spirits are indeed the souls of those executed unjustly, they may be lashing out in anger. They do not distinguish between the Japanese soldiers of the past and the American tourists of the present. To them, anyone invading their space is an enemy. The Grand Hyatt Taipei remains a top destination for travelers. The service is world-class, and the location is unbeatable. Yet for those who know the history, every stay is a gamble. You might have a perfectly peaceful night of sleep in a luxury bed, or you might wake up at 3 in the morning with the smell of sulfur in your nose and a shadow standing at the foot of your bed. The hotel offers comfort, but the land offers only memories of pain. As you walk through the lobby today, notice the absence of the scrolls. Look at the marble floor and wonder what lies beneath the concrete slab. The city of Taipei has grown over its wounds, but it has not healed them. The Grand Hyatt is a beautiful mask worn over a scarred face. The next time you check into a hotel room and feel a sudden chill or hear a knock on the window, do not dismiss it. You may be sleeping on top of a Warzone cemetery where the dead are still waiting for their release.